Let's take a step back in time to the heart of the 1980s. Big hair was in, cassette tapes ruled the airwaves, neon was everywhere, and car makers were throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck. Pontiac was one of those automakers, proudly touting their now iconic tagline, "We build excitement." From the Firebird to the Firo, they weren't exactly lying. But not every Pontiac was born to stir the soul or burn rubber. Asterisk, because nestled deep within the lineup was something a little more grounded, practical. Let's call it what it was: ordinary. Today we're talking about a car that's so far removed from the excitement Pontiac promised, it almost feels like satire. Meet the 1987 Pontiac T-1000 car, so humble, it made beige seem bold, asterisk. But here's the twist. One just popped up on Bring a Trailer. And not just any junkyard escapee. This one's clean, complete, and sitting at just 68,000 original miles. It's a survivor. A forgotten slice of 80s commuter culture. And somehow, 37 years later, it's still here, ready for its second act. So let's dig in, because while this car may not be fast, the nostalgia hits hard and fast. Asterisk now, if the name T-1000 sounds familiar, that's probably because you're thinking of Terminator 2, the relentless shape-shifting villain played by Robert Patrick, who could sprint after speeding cars and morph into just about anything. Sadly, or hilariously, this Pontiac T-1000 is the complete opposite. It doesn't morph. It doesn't chase. It doesn't even get up to highway speed without some coaxing and a good tailwind. Asterisk, what it does do, however, is take us back to a time when compact economy cars were absolutely everywhere. The T-1000 was Pontiac's badge-engineered version of the Chevrolet Chevette, GM's budget-friendly compact that became the default choice for people who didn't care about horsepower or styling, just getting to work without breaking the bank. Asterisk, you see, not everyone in the 80s was driving Camaros or C4 Corvettes. Many people were driving these little runabout Chevettes, Escorts, Civics, Sentras. They were cheap, they were simple, and in most cases, they were completely disposable. And that's what makes this T-1000 so fascinating, because almost none of them were saved. They rusted, they broke. They were used up and tossed aside. Asterisk, yet somehow this final year 1987 model has beaten the odds. And while it was never fast, never fancy, and certainly never famous, it has survived in pretty remarkable shape. Asterisk, under the hood is GM's hardy little 1.6-liter four-cylinder. It's producing a whopping 65 horsepower. That's right, 65, not 165. Not even close. Paired to a 3-speed automatic, it wasn't built for speed. It was built for simplicity, efficiency, and, well, that's about it. Asterisk, but it's not entirely Spartan. This T-1000 was surprisingly well optioned for a car in its class. It came with power, steering a must-have if you've ever tried parking one of these without it. Cloth-trimmed seats for a bit of comfort. An AM/FM radio so you could listen to Huey Lewis or Def Leppard. While sitting in traffic, trim rings on the wheels to give it a hint of style, and even air conditioning, which was still a big deal in this segment. Asterisk, sure, it's not flawless. The listing notes that it had some collision damage around 30 years ago, par for the course. For a commuter from the 80s, and it reportedly has some hesitation when going into reverse, but in the grand scheme of things, those are minor issues, especially for a car that was never expected to make it out of the Clinton administration, let alone the TikTok era. Asterisk, and that's what makes this T-1000 interesting. It's not valuable. In the traditional sense, it's not rare because it was a special edition. It's rare because it's still here. Kind of car you can't believe wasn't already turned into a washing machine. And that alone gives it a certain kind of charm. Asterisk, you might be wondering who would want this car? What's the market for a slow, softly sprung, fuel-sipping Pontiac hatchback that shares more DNA with an office chair than a performance coupe? Asterisk, well, there is a market. For one, classic car collectors who specialize in survivor cars vehicles that are still wearing their original paint, original interiors, and haven't been torn apart and Frankenstein back together. This T-1000 is that kind of car. It's the kind of thing that stands out because it's so ordinary, because you just don't see them anymore. Asterisk, and then there's the film industry. Period-correct cars are always in demand, especially for background. Roles in movies and TV shows. Not every car on screen can be a Trans Am or a DeLorean. Sometimes, a director just needs a believable normal car to sit in a driveway or drive past the main character. This Pontiac fits that role perfectly. It's a rolling backdrop for the 1980s and it doesn't cost much to put on set. Asterisk. Heck. Maybe this car deserves its own role. Picture it. A down-in-its-luck T-1000 that just wants to be remembered. Not as a joke, not as a punchline, but as a real, dependable part of history. Someone called Netflix. Asterisk. And let's not forget the charm of owning something so offbeat. Imagine pulling into a Cars and Coffee event with this thing. While everyone's gathered around the usual Porsches, Mustangs, and Teslas, you show up in a time-warp Pontiac that looks like it drove straight out of a Reagan-era JCPenney parking lot. You'd have a crowd around it in no time, partly from laughter, partly from nostalgia. Asterisk, the T-1000 is a car that makes people smile. Maybe it's a grin of disbelief. Maybe it's a flood of memories. Either way, it leaves an impression. And in a world where every other car tries so hard to be bold, loud, and fast, this little Pontiac is content just being itself. Asterisk. Which brings us to the bigger picture. Not every collectible car has to be fast. Not every classic has to have a V8 or a racing pedigree. Sometimes what makes a car valuable is its story, its authenticity, its place in the everyday lives of real people. And few cars represent that as honestly as the T-1000. Asterisk. It's the car your high school math teacher drove. The one your neighbor commuted in. One your parents considered buying but passed up for a used Cutlass Supreme. And now, decades later, it's back ready to tell its story. Asterisk. So here we are, looking at a 1987 Pontiac T-1000, a car that defied the odds, that refused to be forgotten, that outlasted the very dealership that sold it. It's not fast, it's not flashy, but it's real, it's rare, it still runs. Asterisk, in a time when the car world is obsessed with horsepower, lap times, and autonomous features, maybe what we need is a little reminder of when driving was simple. When 65 horsepower was enough. When air conditioning and an AM/FM radio made your day. When the only touchscreen in your car was the window crank. Asterisk. So whether you're a collector, a nostalgic soul, or just someone who loves an underdog story, the 1987 Pontiac T-1000 might just be the hero we didn't know we needed. It's not the kind of car you fall in love with at first glance. But give it a chance, and it might just win you over with its charm, its honesty, its persistence. Asterisk, because sometimes the most ordinary cars end up telling the most extraordinary stories. Asterisk. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this trip down automotive memory lane, be sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Would you drive a T-1000? Or do you remember someone who did? Share your story, we'd love to hear it. Asterisk, until next time. Drive safe, stay weird, and never underestimate the power of a survivor.